Welcome to the Urban Complex, a system of interrelated, emotion-charged ideas, feelings, memories, and impulses. This name takes the definition and lays out what a listener should expect. A podcast where ideas, feelings, and memories collide, leading towards meaningful change. I'm co-host Chris Richardson. Please enjoy the journey with the Urban Complex. Smarter cities for a stronger tomorrow.
All opinions by Chris Richardson, Dominic Papa, and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinions of Arizona State University, the Arizona Department of Education, or the Arizona Commerce Authority. Any endorsement of or messages from sponsors or solely supporting the production of this podcast. There is no relationship further than podcast purposes with any sponsor unless separately created with another entity. Enjoy the Urban Complex. Smarter cities for a stronger tomorrow.
All right, Chris, here we are another week.
Yeah, I'm getting a little rain fatigue over here. To me, what's top of mind is the weather, unfortunately. For Phoenicians, it's not normal to get too much on the monsoon side. We can get them. They can be pretty nasty. But I swear it feels like it's rained here, I don't know, daily for the last almost week plus, at least in Scottsdale. And it's pretty significantly over the last month. So I think it looks, knock on wood, behind us. I'm just excited for that. That's kind of top of mind for me.
Been a little wild watching in high rise in downtown, watching the storms, monsoons hit, and just seeing these palm trees and downtown.
They pounded Phoenix yesterday. It was nuts.
It was wild.
So the guest today, pretty excited because we've been talking. We need to get back in person. Artie Tandon, one of the former guests, recommended we had to talk to Brenna. I don't personally know her, but in preparation for Smart City Expo Atlanta, that's kind of how she came to us today. So I'm excited to hear what she has to say. I think you know her, though. Why don't you tell us how you know Brenna?
Just met her a couple times, and it just been completely kind of astounded about what she's been able to do, both in her couple roles that we'll get into on the show. But I actually met her in Barcelona at the Smart City World Expo there. She was presenting on a massive panel, and I was in the audience. And she established something for the city of Chicago, spinning it out of her role there that really focuses on helping cities drive innovation strategies kind of from the outside in, similar to the organization that I started here in Greater Phoenix, the Institute for Digital Progress. City Tech Collaborative is incredibly powerful in what they do to help cities drive innovation strategy. So I usually just sit in these conferences and listen. Never really one to get up to the mic, walk down the aisle, get up to the mic and actually ask the questions in these big conference halls. But I remember I asked a question and said, I'm just so inspired about the City Tech Collaborative story. It really matches kind of the idea and vision we're setting for Greater Phoenix. I would love to chat with you. And so we met after in the hall and we were able to just kind of download a little bit.
That's great.
I think you'll hear from this story exactly why. It just fits into this idea that we have about how smart cities should actually be done and how they should be led and how it needs to be focused on collaboration. So it's going to be.
You're Italian. They say all roads lead to Rome. But for you, it seems like we've had 4 or 5 guests where all roads lead to Smart City Barcelona. And let's hope as we get together, same thing goes for Atlanta. I can't wait.
Totally. I guess if you're in the smart city space, you've got to go to Barcelona for the conference, right? So yeah, let's hope we get back there. Should we bring her on?
Let's do it.
All right, here we go.
Support for this episode of The Urban Complex comes from Worldwide Technology.
What if we could connect people to new possibilities, turn thinking into a way forward, solve problems before they become a problem, and share the future with everyone? We can. At WWT, we connect businesses to technology to make the impossible possible, to reach better decisions faster, to accelerate progress. Together, let's make a new world happen.
All right, Brenna, please let Dom and I give you a warm welcome to our podcast, The Urban Complex.
Hi, guys. It's great to see you.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. We just like our guests to start helping our audience know a bit about themselves. So just tell us a little about you as a person and background, and kind of take your time, and we can lead up to your current role as the CEO of the Tech Collaboratives. So.
Sure. So I'm Brenna Berman. As you said, I'm the CEO of City Tech, and we can talk about that in a little bit. Prior to that, I was the CIO for the city of Chicago for about 7 years under Rahm Emanuel. And that job, which still was one of my favorites, was a combination of the traditional operational tech. So, running the email and the servers and all of the applications that the city needed to bring in revenue and operate snowplows. But also I held the mayor's innovation agenda, which included, focusing on technology as an economic development tool for the city around, startups and creating jobs and bringing more tech-centered businesses downtown, but also focused on our what you might call our smart cities agenda, which is not what the mayor ever called it, but ranged
Right.
from, the open data agenda that we had early on to driving IoT and predictive analytics and broadband across the city. So it included both the operational responsibilities of a traditional CIO and the innovation agenda for the mayor as well.
It seemed like a lot was going on in Chicago. Hardick was at the state. I remember early on at my ASU days, I met with Joshua Schenk, I think the chief data officer.
Tom Schenk, yeah.
Tom Schenk, yeah, sorry,
Okay.
Tom Schenk. Got
Yep.
mixed with a Joshua that we worked on with a different guests here. Yeah, so just a lot there. Plus, a lot of it tied back to Cisco, which is funny. A lot of those folks were former Cisco, and we just had boss wars. But okay, so let's so great for thanks for that background. Why don't we talk about City Tech Collaborative now, and what's it trying to achieve, and
Sure.
what's it making happen?
So City Tech is an urban solution accelerator, and I actually founded the organization as a nonprofit when I was still CIO. And the goal early on was to create additional innovation capacity for the city. Anybody who's been a city CIO or any sort of public or educational sector CIO knows you have limited capacity, especially in the innovation area. Our procurement rules, our limited funding really makes it difficult to do those things that push the envelope. And so the goal of City Tech was to expand the capabilities that we had to create innovative partnerships and develop innovative solutions that were beyond what we could procure through a traditional RFP. And so we founded City Tech through a nonprofit collaborative solution incubator in Chicago called UI Labs, which helped us bring together a diverse set of partners that ranged from large tech companies like Microsoft, Accenture, and Siemens to our large utilities like ComEd, which is our local electric utility. Because frankly, it's really hard to think about smart cities in a given place without your utilities.
Yeah.
Whether those are your telecoms or your gas utility, et cetera. For us, our electric utility was a long-term partner, and our universities, right? Chicago is incredibly lucky for how extensive our university infrastructure is, from U of I to the University of Chicago to Northwestern, Illinois Tech, DePaul, Loyola. Right? We are awash in university researchers and graduate students and college students, all who roll up their sleeves and come to the table. And City Tech brought all of that together, including even startups. And City Tech's model evolved from, bringing that excess or that innovation capacity to the table to solve just problems in Chicago well, that's great. But it's really hard to go to, an Accenture, for example, and say, we've got this problem in Chicago, help us solve it, which they were always interested in doing, right? Because Accenture is headquartered not too far outside of Chicago, but that doesn't create a market for them, right? It's really hard to create a business model that allows them, a local partner in Accenture to go internal and say, we should invest in this boss, whoever that is. As opposed to being able to say, this is a problem for all cities. There's a market here. There's dozens of customers that have this water management problem or this mobility problem or this, electric vehicle charging problem. So City Tech evolved to be a collaborative innovation platform for urban challenges in general. And so the goal there was not to just solve Chicago's problems, but to bring multiple cities to the table to solve the problems that most cities face. And in doing so, create the scale and the market stability that companies and universities need to invest in those solutions, right? Create a space where multiple cities could come to the table and express those requirements that they have before the market is fully formed, right? So that they have a voice in the solutions that come to the market and it better fits their needs, and create that sustainability and scalability that we weren't quite seeing in the smart cities marketplace if you think back 5 or 10 years ago.
Right.
So
or the result you get when you do let Accenture in to help define the requirements is like a 10 million price tag, and everyone's saying, wait, what?
Right.
Because they have to throw people at it to figure out how to make it reality. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
So the goal of the model, and it's been pretty successful in a lot of ways. We've done about 20 projects in the last 5 years, was to give everyone at the table, whether you're the university, the community organization, the large or small, like tech corporation, and the city, kind of the cover that they need to bring their incentives and their requirements to the table to work together in a co-development model. And that should tell you probably the most important person in the room is the lawyer who helps work out all of those commitments. That was the first thing we spent a lot of time on, was that legal process.
Were you a former lawyer?
No, not at all. Not at all. But the lawyer on our team is probably our most favorite person.
Yep. You know when you get a good one, that's for sure.
Absolutely.
I absolutely love that story, that vision, and that model. I know when we discussed it in Barcelona, it's a lot like what we're doing here in Greater Phoenix. Yep. You mentioned, Chicago, it's got a ton of suburbs, a ton of, smaller communities surrounding it. As you were building this, did you see those, smaller community suburbs coming to the table with you, or is it one of those where you're already kind of looking after them anyway? Talk to me about kind of how maybe the surroundings outside of Chicago is working with you.
Right. So to be honest, the answer is yes and no. And the reason for that is the politics. So back when we were founded, and you mentioned Hardik Bhatt, Chris, who I worked with in a number of roles, right? He was the city CIO when I was still at IBM, and we partnered then. And he went on to Cisco as the head of their smart cities program for a while, and then came back as the state CIO. So he and I have been partners for a long time, which has been wonderful. But at the time that he was state CIO and I was city CIO, our respective bosses, the mayor and the governor, did not have the strongest working relationship, which
you cannot talk to Hardik.
That's not entirely
inaccurate. I know. I'm kidding.
No, and so he and I would meet for coffee really quietly, really early.
In a place, in a very neutral place, huh?
Right. And so we did some things together to try and share learnings and set standards. And to be honest, I don't know that we did as much work together as you would hope between, a large city that's got assets and commitments, et cetera, the way Chicago can, and the way some smaller entities who don't necessarily have those kinds of resources. We were able to, and there are actually areas around Chicago. Aurora is a really good example that through no impact from Chicago has been doing amazing smart cities work, right? That we've learned from in Chicago. But some of the services Chicago provides extend out to the suburbs, like the water department services, close to 140 municipalities.
Wow.
So work we did with the water department would extend to them, but it wasn't necessarily.
Great point. You find common ground.
And you work.
It takes the politics away, and you just started.
So where we would find partners, though, had nothing to do with Illinois, right? We worked closely with places like South Bend and Akron, and our goal was always, when we were looking at any problem, right, whether we were looking at a flooding challenge or a homeless challenge, is you find other cities that help you answer problems that you have with the solution you're looking at. So South Bend was always a great partner because we had really willing participants in their CIO, in their mayor at the time, Mayor Pete. And so they were a great partner because they were nearby. South Bend is really close, so they could come to Chicago and work with us really easily. They were a really willing partner. They had a really strong CIO at the time. They have a really strong CIO now, and they are much smaller than Chicago, so we could prove that our solution scaled down. No. We have a really strong ongoing partnership with the City of London. right? So especially Transport for London in the mobility space, they are much larger than Chicago. So that's a really good way for us to prove that our solution scales up to a place that's about twice the size as our population, and frankly, much denser when you think about the way the city's organized, right, is much denser than Chicago. Other cities, right, that we worked with, LA, Houston, Akron, right, there are reasons in all of those cities, and we have more than 30 partners around the world that we've done work with. There were always reasons they were at the table that span, both their sort of willingness from a team perspective. They were sort of like-minded thinkers in the innovation space, but also they allowed us to prove something around the solution scale or the applicability to a slightly different set of requirements than we had in Chicago, which is really valuable to our corporate partners who then want to take that out into the marketplace, and they have proof that it can be implemented somewhere than just Chicago.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I love that idea of really concentrating on that reason, like building the team for a specific reason. I love that because sometimes you try to bring everyone for no reason and then nothing gets done and everyone fails. So I absolutely love that. All right, Brenna. So here's our most favorite question with all our guests, as this is, kind of geared towards a smart city podcast. We love to ask each of our guests, what's your definition of a smart city? We obviously realize it's one of the most loaded questions, as there is no answer, but we love to kind of see how the backgrounds and perspectives of our guests weave through that answer. So tell us kind of your view on smart cities. And then I think the more interesting conversation we can have is, in your mind, what's working and kind of what's not working today in smart cities.
Sure. So I've been asked that question of what is a smart city probably dozens of times, and we've written a couple of blog posts or articles about it in the last 10 years. And I actually think a smart city is actually whatever's relevant to that individual city's needs and culture, right? What is important to Chicago in terms of how it leverages technology to, City Tech's tagline has always been, helping cities be healthier, happier, and more efficient through technology. The answer to that, like what that looks like in Chicago, is going to be entirely different than pick another big city like Seattle, right? We could implement similar things in Chicago and Seattle, but the cultures are very different. So the definition of, if you were to write a smart cities vision for Chicago and a smart cities vision for Seattle, they're going to look very different because the cultures are different, even though there's similar challenges, the sizes are not so different. If you scale down to a smaller city, that even, maybe another Midwestern city where the cultures are maybe not so different from Chicago, their challenges are going to be different because their size is different, and their smart cities vision is going to be different again. And if you scale up to one of these, massive sort of Asian cities, or a really large, quickly growing city in, say, sub-Saharan Africa, like Lagos, which is growing so quickly, what is it, 72 people an hour or something? It's incredible, right? The rate of growth. The challenges they're trying to face and their cultural context, right, which influences all sorts of things, like what does privacy mean to them, right? What is family structure to them? What are they trying to solve, and what does happier, healthier, and more efficient mean in their culture is different than it is for me in Chicago, where, I go home every day. So I actually think it's a bit of it's a great question because it's a great discussion, but I think it's a fool's errand for us to try and get, 20 experts in a room and define what a smart city is, so we can all work towards that. Because what it is for me in Chicago is going to be different than what it is anywhere else.
Dom, we've never been called fools before. I don't know.
No, not you. I don't think any of us
it's perfect.
try and do it.
I absolutely love it. That's right.
I do think it's important, though, to think about what it means in a given city. Totally. And work towards that instead of just sort of throwing things at a wall.
Well, it goes back to what you said earlier. Focus on the specific reason,
right? And
bring the players together, get the groundswell, get it narrowed in. Yeah, I love it. Thank you. Yeah.
And I think that comes to your second question of what's working and what's not. And I think that we can kind of narrow that a bit. I think that depends on where you are, because I think we've seen elements of smart cities and even large, full-blown smart cities working elsewhere in the world, and I don't think much is working in the US. to be honest. I've it depends on how cranky I am. Maybe when you ask the question how early it is in the morning and how old my 7-year-old was up that day, because he's an early riser. But I really think that we've not leveraged the promise of the technologies that are kind of captured by that term. I don't think, and to be honest, we're all, I think, still struggling to maybe, find a silver lining, if there is one, in this pandemic. That did provide a burning platform for a lot of cities to think about what they could be doing and how to move out of that. And I think a lot of cities in the US did not think about how technology could help them in the challenges they were trying to address with the pandemic. That's not true for all cities. Like, for example, like San Diego pivoted towards technology when they perhaps were not one of our strongest examples of a smart city before that. They've pivoted towards technology. But I would struggle to actually, this always makes me nervous because I certainly am not aware of what every city in the United States is doing.
Right.
So please don't call and yell at me because I didn't mention your amazing projects. I know that there are so many amazing sort of CIOs and CTOs and CDOs working on incredible work that I just haven't heard about yet, and I would love to. But in general, I think that smart cities in the United States is still incredibly immature.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's a lot of leadership in cities that is still incredibly unaware of what it takes to implement these challenging technologies, whether you're talking about advanced analytics or IoT, these suite of technologies that come under the heading of smart cities, of what it takes to implement them and manage them at scale with the proper guidelines around security and privacy.
Yeah.
These are not pilots. These are not small projects, and cities are complex, nuanced places to work. And to be clear, I don't think that city governments are alone in that challenge, right? Manufacturing is still struggling. Even banking, right? More highly capitalized industries are still working through what it means to implement these smart technologies. But I think that there's a couple of critical factors that are missing in smart cities. And this might be where I get on a soapbox a little bit, but I think that the three things that I would say have been a failure for us. One is the business model around smart cities has been entirely focused on government being like the city government, right? Maybe the state involvement, depending on like what your city structure is, because it's a little bit different everywhere, right? Chicago is a strong mayor and the city kind of runs everything. City government kind of runs everything in Chicago. You have different models, whereas, city county partnerships and the state might be a stronger player in a given city, but where the government is viewed as like the owner of the entire smart city plan or project. That's a relatively new perspective on the role of government around large sort of civic projects, new being like the last 25 to 30 years. If you go back before that and you look at large transformative investments in our cities, and that was not like the government was always at the table, but the government didn't own that. And if you look at the footprint of a city in the West and who actually has like the stewardship and ownership of the footprint of the city, in the West, the city government has like 20%.
Yeah.
If you truly want to transform your city, it's not enough for the government to, like the government could implement smart technologies all over their footprint and you're at 20%.
Yeah.
The rest is owned by, universities. Like Chris, I think about your work, right? Universities are huge footprints in cities. You've got big development.
Dr. Crow and ASU are doing amazing things right now.
And you've got Ohio State. Yeah.
Yep.
And so right.
No, I was just saying you're exactly right. Yeah, we're seeing massive developers with massive pieces of property actually rewriting the scripts in our community. Right.
And the partnership between those massive developments in the city and the culture of the city and how you have that combined conversation is actually in a lot of places, not everywhere, but in a lot of places not happening.
Yeah.
So that's I think a miss right now in the United States is a holistic conversation about the transformation of the small C city in and in its place is this focus on the city government being responsible for all of that when they are not the only player.
But aren't some of the efforts in Asia, so to speak, that you referenced as positive earlier, aren't they doing just that? Isn't the government and the agency driving?
But they own like 80 to 90% of the responsibility. So that's the difference.
And they have vision and responsibility. Okay, gotcha.
Right.
So just making sure. But so it wouldn't necessarily work in our environment because that's what we're trying to do, but they don't know it.
Right. So Singapore can be responsible for the entire smart cities program in Singapore because like 80% of the population in Singapore lives in public housing. Right. Right. Because
so the government already owns it anyways. Right. They have full control by design.
Right.
Whereas here it's acting like full control, but they don't have the control.
Right. They don't act right. Like most of us don't actually live in public housing.
Right.
Right. And even, you know, if you actually look at the number of private streets in the US, right, our entire street infrastructure is not entirely controlled by the government even. No, right. No. As opposed to what you find in the Middle East or in Asia, et cetera. So there's been a switch in the West around smart cities, not just this, but it has an implication for smart cities where we're entirely focused. Like we've put all the responsibility of this transformation on an organization, city government, which actually doesn't have all of the power to drive that, as opposed to, you know, obviously this is a strong opinion of mine, right? A more collaborative model where all the players are at the table to share that responsibility, to share that cost, So which brings me to my second point, the other missing voice. And I think this has probably been highlighted extensively during the period of the pandemic and the racial and societal unrest that was highlighted or kind of brought to a boiling point with the murder of George Floyd is the voice of residents in the definition of these major kinds of transformation in our cities is not well represented in a systematic way in the development of these plans or even the implementation of these solutions, right? It's been core to City Tech. And I know it is in other programs as well. You'll find this in, you know, we were talking before we started recording about Dallas. In the Dallas Innovation Alliance, you'll find a really strong perspective on how you engage residents in the definition of programs, even the design of technology, right? Not just getting their feedback at the end, but how you include the voice of the resident in the design of major technologies. Seattle's had a very strong approach on this early on under Michael Mattmiller when he was still the CTO. But you are seeing this in certain places, but it's not ubiquitous. And, you know, when CIOs were responsible for implementing a city's financial system, I don't know if the residents had to have a huge voice in that, because as long as the city's finances ran properly, I think residents and taxpayers were fine with that. When you're talking about technologies that are going to change their everyday life, how they access mobility systems, right? How they have access to healthcare and the equity in the accessibility and understanding of the health systems of the city, that has direct day-to-day impact on the value or the happiness and wholeness of those residents' life, right? We need to listen to what they have to say about that and what they want those implementations to include or not include. And so that's critical. And the difference of opinions you're going to get depending on let's go with the demographics across a given city, because I don't have to tell you, the word resident is not right homogeneous. So, right, the way that you can represent those differing opinions and address their differing needs is critical. So how you bring, you know, a racial and equity and inclusive lens to a technical implementation is something that has to go beyond ensuring that your implementation team is diverse, but your methodology of implementation has to also address that bias at critical points. And that, I think, is nascent in how we're doing our smart cities work. And then the last piece that has been entirely missing in any city CIO or CTO who has to talk to their budget director ever, which is all of us, is the budget piece, right? We have no idea how to pay for this. And I think that is at least in part because we've been trying to pay for these things as if they are IT projects. And anyone on this call who has experience in doing, let's call them somewhat traditional technology projects knows that, you know, TCO or ROI calculations in IT projects. Wow, that was 3 acronyms in one sentence. I apologize, but they have a horizon.
Looking like a true IT vet, though.
Thank you. have a future in healthcare if I can keep this up. Right. When you're laying out or making a pitch to your budget director, right, around an IT project, whether that's your CRM system or whatever, it has an 18-month to 24-month, right, ROI, and you're planning your total cost of ownership model around maybe 3 years, right?
20-year paybacks don't work for smart city projects.
Except smart cities is about roads and bridges and neighborhoods. So we're trying to fund the rebuilding and the transformation of a city with its roads and bridges and trains and cars and whatever else on an 18-month ROI. And so, and we've all been to these we've all been to the smart cities conferences, and they're very helpful in terms of meeting your peers and learning what's going on. But if we all close our eyes for a minute and we look at the expo floor, and they are full of technology companies, and there's not a single construction company, real estate development company, or infrastructure bank at that conference. And those are the people that build cities. Those are the people that talk about their ROI or their ownership models or their buyback periods in years and decades. And
to talk to them, they just see the world so differently.
Right. And we are at that intersection.
Yeah.
So basically we have half of our players on the field or half of our pieces on the board, and the other half, we need to get them there. Pick your analogy. You really don't want me to do that, but we need to get that other half on the field, because this isn't about an IT system that has a little bit of a bridge with it. This is about a bridge that has the right IT added to it. And we've got that proportion.
Back to your point earlier about the city leading it, and ASU doing some interesting things. Like we have this multi-year, probably 20-year development project where there's a system of developers called Catellus, and they're at the center of this. And just even getting Catellus to see the nuances of tech needs, we had to bring in a specialty kind of infrastructure provider that serves that industry. And then my group and our internal groups have helped educate. It's been fascinating to see how we can open eyes to what's possible, but still so much work. No fault of Catellus. They just know how to bring developers together in that formal way of, hey, here's the project life cycle. Here's how you fit into our ecosystem. And here's how you're going to get your return. Let's make it happen. You're dead on. Like, it's a huge, huge gap.
And I think it's starting, but I don't think it's there yet. And I don't think it's there yet to do the sort of complex system of systems investment management that a full smart cities transformation, like some of the major projects you see in Europe, that they require.
Yeah, this is great. And this has been a fabulous conversation so far, because it's just so spot on and timely, especially because I think you're right with the pandemic. I think it's brought to light a lot of these challenges. And I think your three core pieces there are spot on. So this has been great. Let's talk about data a little bit. Many of our guests talk about data. Are there any unique ways that you've seen from the City Tech Collaborative that cities are organizing or doing something unique so that data is surfaced in new ways? Talk to us about kind of the influence of data within your work, but also maybe in the past work.
No, that's actually a great question. There's so many amazing examples across cities of the impact and the importance of data. And I think that's going to continue. I'm trying to, let's see, a good example. When
we were doing a little bit of research, we were interested in one about the urban heat islands, or let's talk. I don't know if you can talk a little bit about that project, because obviously it rings true here in Phoenix. So we were very interested when we saw that.
It's a little warm there. So this actually grew out of, oftentimes, or in my experience, a project where you're leveraging sort of new data to answer a problem can develop in one of two ways, right? You can start with a problem, right? We've got a nut to crack, and you could then go looking for the data that can help you crack that problem. And to be honest, I think that's at least that's 80% of our work. We try to be very challenge driven. To be honest, sometimes it does go the other way, where you just are, someone either either brings to you, or frankly, as a city, right? Cities, and I don't have to tell you guys this, and universities are probably the same, right? Are a treasure trove of data, and to take a little bit of your time in a week to sort of sift through that data, looking for patterns you might not have seen before, and then figuring out how that pattern might help you improve service or something, right? It's a little bit reverse engineering in a sense, but it is amazing what you can find. And there were a number of projects, both at my time in the city of Chicago and then at City Tech, that came from that. And the urban heat, I mean, the challenge around urban heat is not new, but this particular project, which was a partnership between Esri and NASA and Microsoft, came in that reverse engineering way. Is Microsoft was doing a project with NASA that City Tech was not part of, helping them basically sort of, so I don't have to tell you guys how much data NASA probably has. And among that data, and NASA was doing Microsoft was doing a project with them, sort of helping them restructure all of their data to make it more accessible internally for their own internal work. And one of the categories of data that NASA has is weather data, and it far exceeds what most of us have access to through like NOAA or something like that. And basically, someone on the Microsoft team said, "This is like really amazing. We should try to figure out what to do with this." So I was like, you've got this amazing hammer. Where is that nail? And someone at Microsoft Microsoft has been a partner of City Tech. They're a founding partner, and they've been an amazing partner to us for over 5 years. And someone said, well, we've got this partner called City Tech. They work with cities all the time. We should just tell them we've got this data and see what they think. And that was kind of what happened. And in a city like Chicago, and this will resonate with a lot of folks, I think, is we've got a great handle on snow, right? Chicago, and like I think Buffalo's the same, right? Really good at snow. Lots of data and expertise around managing snow, because honestly, it comes all the time. And even when there are outliers in snow or cold, right? There's a really strong ability to deal with both that data and the response to, like, the operational response to those events. Heat data, one, there's less of it. There's less analysis of it. And the variability in heat data, there's been less variability in heat data, except recently, which is absolutely a comment on climate change. So for Chicago, and I'm not talking about like a hot summer day we are all annoyed about, I am talking about a truly outlier heat event. Chicago, until this past summer, or 2 summers ago, I apologize, so like 2019, had not had an actual emergency heat event since the late 90s.
Wow.
Right, it had been that long. In the one in the late 90s, I believe we had it was just over 500 deaths because of that heat event, that heat emergency. Wow. So there's just not a lot it's a sparse data event. So we began working with Microsoft and NASA. And again, I mentioned the lawyers before. That was the first thing, because this is not publicly available data. But then you get into the really interesting work of not only how do you structure the data to turn it into a product that both your emergency services team and your health department can use to drive services. That is actually where Esri stepped in, and we talk about scale, right? I don't know if there's a city in the United States that doesn't have an Esri implementation. So making that data available through an Esri layer, which actually means it just rolls out in the next Esri upgrade. Like, there's nothing new to buy. So when you think about that impact on public safety to any emergency response to any city that just happens to have Esri, which their footprint is phenomenal. So when you talk about,
and that's what I learned from Tom. Like, he was just taking that Esri data and publishing it for the city of Chicago and for citizens to even look at. It was interesting.
Yeah, and so it changed the ability that Chicago and any other Esri client had to respond to an emergency heat event, which we all know is becoming more and more likely to happen in any given summer, which, for you guys in Phoenix, is year round, right? So
yeah, exactly. The inverse of good data about snow is what we have in Phoenix.
Right. And so it was a really, really interesting, to be honest, the technical work was not, and I say that was not my role, but it was not all that challenging, right? The technical integration was not all that challenging once we had all the pieces in place. What was really interesting was having in the room together, right, the City of Chicago Office of Emergency Response and the health department, and understanding how they would use the data to drive action.
But isn't that funny? Somehow that is the hardest part. Those folks don't normally talk to each other. When you get them there, they're like, wait a second. I see you on the other floor of the building, or that building over there. I never knew what you did.
Right. Well, and then having Esri in the room talking to NASA, which was a first time as well.
Wow.
And them talking about, right, how, and some of this is around the technical architecture, but NASA they don't openly share their data the way NOAA does, right? This is, for NOAA, this is part of their business model in a sense. They want to be a data sharing agency. It's core to their DNA. It's not for NASA. So that was also a different discussion of, this is a new role for us to play. And so that was what was interesting, is sort of rethinking the business models, if you will, of all of these different partners to better serve. And it wasn't just about the residents of Chicago. It was, how do we turn this into a model that can be basically productized for NASA and Esri, so that every city in Chicago could have, or every city across the country could benefit.
That's so great. So we're kind of switch gears here. You referenced conferences earlier. Dom and I have been doing this weekly since January. Outside of our local guests, we haven't been able to get together with our guests in quite some time.
No.
Hopefully that'll change next month. Tell us, I know it's shifting a little bit, but we met through Artie, or at least I did. I met you through Artie. Smart City Expo in Atlanta. Tell our audience, what are you excited about? And also, you have a panel, back to data, titled Universal Basic Mobility to Transit, Data and AI to Advance Socioeconomic Mobility. Tongue twister there for me, but help us understand, what are you excited about? And tell us a little bit about what the panel will be about.
Yep. So I think this has got to be the answer you get from everybody. I'm just excited to see people.
Yeah.
I mean, for me,
and interact and like high five and find out what they're doing.
Leave my computer at home because I don't want to be anywhere near Zoom. I mean, the conferences are one, right? Smart Cities Expo in Atlanta, I think, has become, for me, actually the no offense to the other conferences, I pre-pandemic, right? I went to other ones. I go to other ones. I've participated in other ones online. There's really good content out there. But I think that Smart Cities Atlanta, frankly, because of the presence of the mayors, which I don't think you get at the other ones, has become a really good way to hear from not only peer practitioners, which is really important to me too, but hearing from the leadership of the cities is really inspiring, and also important for me in my work at City Tech, because it helps me shape our strategy of where we're going in terms of the solutions and the products we develop. Because at the end of the day, right, I'm looking for sort of leadership from not just, Mayor Lightfoot in Chicago, but the mayors of all the cities in the country in terms of where they're seeing their priorities. So hearing from them firsthand is great. And I think Smart Cities Expo in Atlanta has all the mayors go there, and it's great to hear from them. But being able to interact with the sort of smart cities practitioners in person is the top reason that this is exciting. We're all going to stand 6 feet apart. We'll all do what we're supposed to, but it's going to be just so nice to be back in person, because, as efficient as I think we've all gotten on Zoom, it's not the same.
I was just talking, ASU does a conference called the ASU GSV conference. They had 3,800 people show up. This happened 2 weeks ago. One known case of COVID spread from that. So it's possible to do.
Yeah, I think we know, none of us want to be stupid about this, right? But I think we know, you wear your mask inside, you get vaccinated, you don't run around hugging people, right? I think we know how to manage this. But I think so in terms of the panel that you mentioned, which I'm really excited about, and this is something that I credit Artie with, is I can't tell you how many mobility panels I've been on in the last, let's go with 5 years, right? It's a lot. And I'm actually not my team's mobility expert, right? He's on like a mobility panel a week. So, and most of them are about the technical trends in mobility, or the importance of data sharing in mobility, or, there's all the niches of mobility from, micro trends from scooters to e-bikes to how we're going to transition to EV infrastructure, and mobility goes on and on. What I love about this panel is it's about how, all of these technology trends, AI in particular, are going to help us ensure that the transformation or the innovation in mobility actually is going to help, those of us, whether you're a practitioner in a given city or a general sort of solution driver like I am at City Tech, right? Mobility is about helping people live their lives in cities, right? Mobility is about breaking down barriers between you, the resident, and the resources that you need to get to, whether that's your job, your schooling and education, or, other resources like, shopping centers, food, healthcare, whatever. And what I think Artie brings to how she curates these conferences is she's really good at getting to the holistic purposes of cities, which is connecting people to the resources they need to live good lives, whatever that means for that person. And mobility systems are the lifeblood that connects that, right? If cities are bodies, mobility is the circulatory system. And most mobility conversations are about the mobility system itself, not its purpose. Right. And the tech, which I love to talk about, right? I want my autonomous vehicle as much as anybody else. But I think it's really important that we don't lose sight about the fact that the purpose of that mobility system is to get the resident and their family to the resources they need to live a happier, healthier, more efficient life. And that's what this panel is about, is the role and how you properly implement these improvements to our mobility system so that it is in service to the residents, not just upgrades to the mobility system in and of itself. And I really am excited about that focus.
Well, can't wait to dig in more. We'll have to have you back on. There's so much we've explored here. Dom and I, we're nerds about this. We talk all day. But back to the journey of the conversation. Tell us a little bit, but finally, in wrapping up, kind of your journey. Is there anyone that's helped you along the way you want to give a shout out to, appreciation? And as you know us in the show, would they be a good fit for a guest on the Urban Complex? Love to get some ideas.
Well, I'll have to change my first names. I always go back to, I had an uncle who was near and dear to me, who was he's one of the country's first computer science professors. So I don't know that I would have grown up as enamored with technology as I did. This dates me terribly. I got my first computer when I was 6, which is a lot younger, and revealing my age, a lot younger than most of my contemporaries. He was the only person I could email. But the reason I always mention him is it was core to his curriculum and how he taught people. He was a teacher at Bentley and Northeastern University in Boston. That technology is always in service to someone else, right? He started every lecture he gave with the example of Alfred Nobel, right? That technology can go one of two ways, and you are responsible for that, right? And they've always taken that with me.
So we can really date you if you tell us what computer he gave you.
Not a chance. I can tell you though that I was sending email in Elm.
Okay, I think I know around the.
So that'll help you. But to be a little bit more in terms of like who I talked to today. To be honest, if you've not talked to him yet, and this is someone that like lots of people know, and is I still get a lot of inspiration from how Michael Matt Miller approached his job in Seattle.
I made a note earlier. That was interesting. I'm from Seattle, so an introduction would be great. If
sure, he's back running government affairs at Microsoft, and not only does he understand the technology, not only does he sort of understand the role of smart cities, but he has a sensitivity and an eloquence around the cultural differences that technology plays in different cities and in different communities that is just innate to how he approaches his work, that I think exceeds certainly like I have to think about that, right? It's just so easy to, in your day-to-day work, kind of, I think and maybe not all of us, right? See, there I go doing it again, to sort of assume that how you think about something is how everyone thinks about something. I think we've all been guilty of that at some point or another, because you are in your own head all day long. And that's just not how he approaches the world. He's always thinking about how technology or a project or whatever he's doing, how that's going to affect or be viewed by the person he's engaging with. So he has this very outside in perspective instead of inside out perspective that I think is really unique and pretty inspiring about how he thinks about these topics.
Oh, that's great. We'll have to reach out to him and get him on the show. It sounds like a great guest to have. And
happy
before
to
maybe, and I know that was maybe our last question, but one more before Chris wraps this up, because I would hate to miss this. As a lot of our audience are mayors, city managers, CIOs. I mean, how can they engage with City Tech? I mean, what is, please, if they're listening to this and saying, wow, I would love to work with City Tech. How's that? What does that look like?
We have a really big table that has a seat for everybody, and it's citytech.org, and they can certainly email or certainly call me. I think you guys have all my details, so if anybody reaches out to you, they can. We're pretty open. They can get us through any of the channels, and we would love to have them, because what we found is that the biggest determinant of success in our work is the innovation perspective and willingness of the partners at the table.
Yeah.
Right. We can overcome any of the other technical funding, skills challenges we might have if there is the willingness to be at the table and do the work of the participants that are there.
Awesome. Well, there's definitely some mayors on top of my mind that I'm going to plug into you. So
that'd be great.
Yep.
That'd be great.
That was great. With that, the Urban Complex gives a big note of thanks to today's guest, Brenna Berman.
Thanks for having me.
Founder and CEO of City Tech Collaborative and former CIO and Commissioner of the Department of Innovation and Technology for the City of Chicago. It's been awesome. Thank you.
Thanks so much, guys. It was so good to talk with you, and I'll see you in Atlanta.
Yeah. See you soon.
Bet. Thanks.
Take care.
Support for this episode of The Urban Complex comes from MST.
MST is a Salesforce certified integrator. We work on building customer experience solutions and deploy them for our customers. As we started evolving, our why also continued to evolve as a company. Over the last 3 years, the whole approach was really revolving around what we call 3 C's, which is customers, colleagues, and community.
All right, Chris, that was Brenna. What'd you think?
And there's so much we could dig into. I have to get a quick drink of water to figure where I start. I'm going to start with her 3 areas of what's missing or misaligned. I know it's really critical to bring everyone to the table, but you kind of need, if you know kind of what the gap is, you can start by bringing the right people to the table. And, we riffed on the very first one. She blew our mind about the business model, and that smart cities planning projects for the last 20 years, at least in the States, are focused on by government. But why is government the one at the table? Why is government the one leading when they don't have the complete span of control per se? And so I think it was interesting how she then kind of converted in the developers really have the vision, but they're not at the Smart City Expos, and they're the ones that really can drive. And so to me, I've seen it firsthand with ASU and Novus Innovation Corridor. I know you're doing some work with some developers. If they have the right mindset, they can make the big or incremental changes that have been kind of missing. I thought that was one. She also talked about the voice of the residents, which we've had a lot of equity discussions lately. And then the budget piece, I thought that was really an interesting piece too, about we've had people figure out, we've asked them how they get a return on these investments, and there's no clear answer. But it's finding that long-term horizon and weaving it in. So I really like that piece.
Yeah, I mean, those are all phenomenal. I was my mind was blown on those 3 pieces because they do all seem to fit together. And I guess for me, it just all made sense, especially because she was so spot on. I mean, you're right. We're working with a developer, Brad Wild and Mira Vista Holdings, who he just gets it. He understands that his piece of property, developing it into a completely smart and connected community can be transformational for the city of Mesa. And so he's deliberately trying to, interject how his property will fit into the city, its plans and its broader vision for its future. And the way he's able to move the project forward, it's just exactly right. The business model kind of needs to change from what we've traditionally thought of how smart cities are led or driven. But I think it's going to take some time to get through it. But it's projects like that and other projects like Novus that I think will really help usher in this maybe new business model for smart cities. So I thought that was a phenomenal conversation to have. I also thought the idea of kind of rethinking the business model for all in a different way for all partners, right? Where she talked about the Urban Heat Project and how bringing NASA together with Microsoft and the city and City Tech, it actually forced the other partners like Microsoft, or not Microsoft, but NASA to rethink their business model because they had never thought about opening their data to share their data that could help solve other challenges, to productize, weather data. I think it's just an interesting coincidence that all of us, all parties, not only cities, all of us need to really start to think about reimagining our business model for the future of cities.
Yeah, when I was at Honeywell, we had one of these 9 behaviors that we were focused on, and one was systems thinking. And she talked about systems of systems thinking, and that's why these are so challenging. If the developer is not at the table, if the tech partner is only focused on tech, if the third party with new data sets doesn't realize that that's a value, like it's these ecosystems that can come together where you can either be the collaborator. I thought one of her stories that was great is just getting the people in the internal departments together. And she called it the easy part, but it's finding the right people, getting them to speak common language. It really is hard, but when you do it right, it seems easy because whoa, that's what you do. And we've got this. And I think that systems of systems investment and systems of systems mindset she shared, that's what moves the ball. So it was just a great perspective.
Yeah. And lastly, to that point, it's not, let's just have everyone around the table for everyone's sake, right? Because as we know, that can cause just managerial nightmares. But as she talked about why she would bring in some cities, right? Because, we wanted to prove that this business model could scale down. So we had South Bend come to the table, or we partnered with London because we want to prove that the model can scale up. And so this is why we would bring these people to the table. And so, it's being very specific in your approach to how you partner and how you build that team in order to either, you all have the similar challenge, or, you all have the similar culture, or, it's being very specific on how you're bringing those partners to the table. I think this was another critical point for city leaders because, sometimes, let's have everyone here. Let's have all these surrounding cities at the table, even though this city doesn't even care about, X, but let's just have them at the table anyway. They're just going to slow down the process, right? No, be very specific on how you build the table and who you put around it for specific projects. I thought that was very interesting.
For sure, man. She could go. I can't wait to kind of dig in a little more of what the conference inspires, and here's what she has to say.
Definitely. Awesome. So Brenna was great. So what do you have for us for cracks in the pavement this week?
Well, I complained about the rain earlier, and so maybe we'll bring forward GPEC, Greater Phoenix Economic Council. They did a fast fact on Arizona's water position. I'm sure they published this because they don't want people to jump in thinking that the U.S. government's limiting use of the Colorado River is going to impact us. In fact, in the article, it states there's very little dependence on the Colorado River by Arizona, which is odd to think about because it does flow through us near the end. But some things that jumped out to me, water's been a focus. I remember I got to go on a helicopter tour with a gentleman that wrote a book about water and see how our reservoirs work. It was amazing. I didn't realize at the time, but it's referenced in the article. Arizona has 5 times more water stored than we use and has never mandated any municipal or residential restrictions, which is crazy. I mean, and the other thing, we currently in 2021 are using less water in a year than we were in 1957. But our population has gone from probably 1.5 million as a state. I think we're now up close to 6, or if not further than 6 million. Think about that. That's amazing. That's amazing that we can do that. And it's all because of better water use, and really good policy. And that's what this audit was showing, is that we're one of the best to look at. I know we've done challenges at our kick with Scottsdale. They're still focused on water to get better improvement. So I think it was a nice, timely article. It's great to shout out to one of our sponsors, GPEC, on what they're doing. I don't know, any thoughts from what you've seen?
No, I think water is a fascinating story, especially for Arizona. Everyone's like, "Oh, you must be out of water." But to your point, it's like, no, thanks to I think Brenna's point, great visionary leadership from the very beginning, way back when, to over prepare for this. We are in a great position. However, what I find fascinating is we can't rest. Even though we're in a great position, we can't rest, because if we do, then it'll start to creep up on us. So we're already talking about how are we preparing, how are we driving new initiatives, how are we developing the next generation tech that's even going to help us be better positioned. Because to your point, I don't see the growth, or the population growth, stopping anytime soon. The development growth stopping anytime soon. So we have to be very smart on how we're preparing now, because think about it. We could be the leaders 30 years from now that people are saying, "Oh, we're glad we had those leaders thinking about it, innovating then." We can't just rest on what the people before us did. So I think it's a great almost tipping point on, where this influx or inversion of where we're going, or where we could go up, or we could go down.
Well, it reminds me a lot of what we had Ron in Closed Loop Partners. He was thinking about closed loop for like materials production and whatnot. Water's so critical. I don't want to trivialize our use of Colorado River. We get about 36% of our water from there, but we have 13 million acre feet of water stored in reservoirs, and we estimate 93% of water that enters the Greater Phoenix waste streams can be reclaimed. We've got, for people that don't know, we've got all these kind of man-made rivers that flow and constantly have water. So we help create this climate of recirculation and that closed loop on water. So, well, to your point, we can't rest, but I don't know. Yeah. I think with changes in policy, it's good to be aware of our current situation and what we're doing.
And like Brenna said, maybe there's an opportunity here for partnerships, finding those other cities, communities, states across the country, or not even across the country, across the world. Like maybe Israel, who we've got a good trade relationship with, is also similar climate as us. Maybe there's a new water initiative between us that will help us drive this forward. So who knows?
Great point. All right. Well, until next time, thanks all.
See ya.
Thanks for listening to The Urban Complex. Smarter cities for a stronger tomorrow. Please find us on where you listen: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. We do love your feedback. Let us know if you have ideas for guests or questions to air on Cracks in the Pavement via social media. The Urban Complex is found on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. Or just shoot me an email, chris@theurbancomplex.com. Till next time.